My name is Donna Butler, 22 years old. When I first met Dylan, I wasn't looking for love. I was just a college senior trying to survive midterms and double shifts at Starbucks. My hands always smelled of roasted beans and sanitizer, and my wallet always felt lighter than it should. Dylan was 30, the kind of man who looked like life had roughed him up a little too early. Tired eyes worn sneakers, a voice that carried both charm and quiet exhaustion. We started talking during the slow hours. He told me about his parents' gambling problems, the mountain of student debt on his back, and how he was still living at home trying to crawl out of the mess. I told him about my dream of moving out of my parents' cramped apartment and building a life on my own terms. We laughed about our shared misery bonded over burnt coffee, and before I knew it, the long work hours didn't feel so long anymore. 2 years later, I finally saved enough to move into my own tiny apartment, bare walls, secondhand furniture, but it was mine. Dylan was still struggling, stuck under the same roof as his parents. I could see how frustrated he was, so when I offered him to move in with me, his face softened in relief. I thought I was helping the man I loved. I didn't realize I was setting myself up to be his safety net. From the start, I paid 80% of the rent. "I'll pay you back once I clear my loans," he said, smiling. And I believed him. We split utilities evenly. But everything else slowly became my responsibility: groceries, cleaning, laundry, cooking. Dylan's job was more physical, long hours at a construction site, while I had a corporate internship that allowed me to work from home. I understood his exhaustion, so I didn't complain. Not at first. But it's strange how resentment creeps in quietly like dust collecting in corners. Every night, when I finished my reports and went to clean up after dinner, I'd find the sink piled high with dishes, the trash can overflowing, and his empty beer cans scattered on the counter. At first, I'd sigh and clean everything, thinking love meant patience. But every time I picked up after him, something inside me grew heavier. I remember one particular weekend. I had to leave early for an office event, and when I came home, I froze at the doorway. The apartment was an absolute wreck. Food wrappers everywhere, laundry spilling from the basket. The smell of old trash lingered in the air like a taunt. I spent the next 3 hours cleaning scrubbing counters, washing dishes, folding his shirts until the room finally resembled a home again. When Dylan came back that evening, he kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and turned on the TV. "You look tired," he said, stretching out on the couch. "What's for dinner?" I stared at him. My hands were raw from cleaning, and he didn't even notice. Something broke in me that night. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, irreversible crack. I told him I was exhausted. He looked confused, then annoyed. "You're being emotional again," he muttered, not even glancing away from the screen. I forced a smile, swallowed my anger, and went to bed without saying another word. Before sleeping, I reminded him one last time to take out the trash. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw it still there, the same bag bloated and leaking. My chest tightened. He came downstairs yawning and asked if I could make breakfast. That was the moment I lost it. "Make your own breakfast, Dylan." I snapped, my voice trembling. He blinked, stunned. I told him how tired I was of doing everything around the house, of being the only adult here. He stared at me silent for a moment before muttering, "You're overreacting. You know how hard I work." That one sentence burned through my patience. I listed every single thing I did: the laundry, the cooking, the cleaning, ironing his shirts, managing bills, and then I asked, "What do you actually do, Dylan?" He looked defensive. "I never asked you to do any of that. You chose to." That was when I saw him clearly for the first time, not as the man I loved, but as a boy who'd grown used to being taken care of. He leaned back, shaking his head. "You sound just like my mom," he said bitterly. "She used to nag my dad about chores, too." Something in me went cold. "I'm not your mother, Dylan," I said quietly, "and I'm done acting like one." He scoffed, thinking it was just another argument I'd get over in a day. But I meant it. I decided that from that day on, I would stop cleaning up his messes. I wouldn't cook for him. I wouldn't iron his shirts. I wouldn't pay more than my fair share of rent. We were supposed to be equals. It was time he started acting like it. That night, as he sat on the couch pretending nothing had changed, I walked past him with a calm I didn't feel. "From now on, you take care of your things, I'll take care of mine," I said. "And starting next month, you pay half the rent, or you move out." He turned to me startled. "Where is this coming from?" "From being tired," I said simply. "Tired of working like a partner, but being treated like a maid." He tried to laugh it off. "You're not serious." But I was. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for setting a boundary. I felt free. The next few days were quiet. He sulked, muttered under his breath, and forgot to do things even more often, testing me. But I didn't give in. When he didn't wash the dishes, I ordered takeout and ate from disposable boxes. When he left his laundry piled up, I stepped over it. Slowly, the power shifted. He realized I wasn't going back to being the girl who carried his weight. I remember catching my reflection one night, hair tied up, face tired but firm, and whispering to myself, "You can't save him, Donna, not this time." And as I turned off the kitchen light, I noticed the trash bag was still sitting by the door. But for once, I didn't touch it. The next morning, the silence between us was thick enough to choke on. Dylan barely looked at me as he left for work, muttering something about how I'd lost it over nothing. But when the door closed behind him, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. That evening, when he came home, the dishes were still in the sink, the garbage untouched. I sat at the table with my laptop open, pretending to type. He glanced at the mess and frowned. "You didn't clean?" he asked. I didn't even look up. "Nope. You were supposed to take out the trash." His tone sharpened. "You know I'm tired after work." "And I'm tired after my work," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You're not the only one who gets to be exhausted." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "So this is what we're doing now? Keeping score." I met his eyes. "No, Dylan. I'm setting balance." For the first time, he didn't have a quick comeback. He just stared, then grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the couch. The sound of the can popping open was louder than any insult. That night, I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling. I didn't want to fight anymore. I just wanted peace. But I knew that kind of peace doesn't come without loss. The next week was a quiet war. He'd leave his dirty socks on the floor. I'd step over them. He'd cook for himself and leave the stove messy. I'd wipe only my side of the counter. Each act of indifference was a statement. We're not a team anymore. And yet deep down, I hoped he'd understand why I was doing this, that he'd apologize, that he'd finally see me as his partner, not his caretaker. But instead, he started coming home later. Sometimes he'd reek of alcohol, sometimes of perfume. One night, he stumbled in after midnight. I was working on a report, the glow of my laptop illuminating the half-clean living room. He dropped his keys on the counter and said with a smirk, "You know, other women don't make such a big deal out of this stuff." I looked up slowly. Other women? He shrugged. Guys at work were saying their girlfriends don't nag. They just understand how hard it is to make a living. I bit the inside of my cheek, refusing to take the bait. "Then maybe you should date one of them," I said flatly. His eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than me now, huh? Just because you got your little promotion." I closed my laptop, gently stood up, and looked at him. "It's not little Dylan. And it's not about being better. It's about being respected." He scoffed, then walked past me toward the couch, mumbling, "You've changed." I didn't reply, but in my mind the words echoed bitterly. "You haven't." The following week, my promotion became official. My boss congratulated me in front of the whole team. I smiled, but part of me felt hollow, because I knew what this would mean at home. That night, when I came back with a small cake, Dylan was already there, slouched on the couch, half drunk, the TV blaring some sports game. "I got promoted," I said softly, setting the cake down. He didn't even look away from the screen. "Good for you." "Good for me," I repeated. "That's all you have to say." He finally turned his expression unreadable. "You think a raise makes you special. You're still just some office assistant with fancy words." His words stung like salt in an open wound. I stared at him, trying to remember the man I once loved. But all I saw was bitterness wrapped in apathy. "Dylan," I said, my voice trembling, "is this really what you think of me?" He shrugged. "I'm just saying, don't get too full of yourself. Men don't like women who act like bosses." I laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. "Then maybe you need a different kind of woman." He smirked. "Maybe I already found one." The room went silent. I looked at him, my pulse thundering. "What does that mean?" He took a long sip of his beer and said casually, "There's this girl at work, Bella. She's different, sweet, feminine, doesn't argue all the time." My stomach dropped. "You're seeing someone—" He shrugged again, like it was nothing. "We've just been talking." She listens. "Something you stopped doing a long time ago." For a second, I felt my chest tighten, but the pain didn't turn into tears. It turned into calm, cold, detached calm. "I see," I said quietly. "Then maybe we're done here." He blinked. "What?" I met his eyes. "Move out. End of the month." He laughed in disbelief. "You're kicking me out. Over what a conversation." "No," I said. "Over years of disrespect." He stood up, face red with anger. "You're just jealous. That's what this is. You can't stand that another woman might want me." I tilted my head slightly, studying him. "I'm not jealous, Dylan. I'm just finally done." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "No more. You'll pack your things by the end of the month. I'll handle the lease myself." He stared at me, his jaw tight, but there was something else in his eyes now, fear. Fine, he spat. You'll regret this. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but not as much as I regret loving you. That night, as I lay in bed, the apartment felt heavier than ever, but beneath the weight of heartbreak, there was something new clarity. Through the paper-thin walls, I could hear Dylan moving around, muttering curses under his breath. I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Let him go. Just let him go." I didn't know it then, but this was the night our relationship truly ended. And the night, something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous began to grow inside me. Not hatred, but the hunger for justice. The days that followed felt like living with a ghost. Dylan stopped speaking to me unless it was necessary. When he did, his words carried the sharp edge of resentment. The air in our apartment was heavy, thick with unspoken anger and the faint smell of cheap beer. He started staying out later, coming home after midnight. Some nights I'd hear him stumble through the door, humming off-key songs, his phone buzzing with notifications. Other nights he wouldn't come home at all. I didn't ask where he was. I didn't need to. One morning, while collecting laundry from the floor, I noticed something. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume. Expensive, floral, unfamiliar. I stared at it for a long time before quietly folding it and placing it on the couch. I didn't need to confirm what I already knew. The apartment that once felt like a small dream now felt like a reminder of everything I'd ignored. By the second week, his things started disappearing. A book from the shelf here, a pair of sneakers there. Each missing item was a silent message: I'm leaving, but I'll make sure you notice. He didn't speak of moving out. He just started doing it. The night before his final day, I came home from work, exhausted but lighter. I was ready to finally close this chapter, but as I unlocked the door, I froze. There on my couch sat Dylan, smirking relaxed, and next to him, a young woman I recognized immediately. Bella. The same Bella he'd spoken about, the one he claimed listened. Her hair was sleek and perfect, her diamond earrings catching the warm light. She looked around my modest apartment like she was touring a museum of poor choices. Dylan smiled lazily. Hey, you're early. My throat tightened. What's she doing here? He shrugged as if it was nothing. It's my last night here. Thought I'd show Bella where I used to live, where I came from. Where I came from. The words hit like a slap. Bella didn't even bother standing. She crossed her legs, eyes gliding over me with faint disgust. It's cozy, she said, her voice honeyed and cruel. I swallowed hard. Welcome, I said quietly. Forcing politeness, I didn't feel. Can I get you something to drink? She smirked. No, thank you. I don't drink tap water. Dylan chuckled. My fingers curled into fists at my side. I didn't give them the satisfaction of an argument. Instead, I nodded and walked to my room. Behind the door, my chest burned with humiliation and anger. How easily he turned my home into a stage for his mockery. Later, I went to the kitchen to make dinner. Just pasta, simple and quiet. Bella appeared in the doorway watching me. I could feel her gaze crawling up and down my back. After a long pause, I turned. Can I help you? She tilted her head. I just don't understand how someone like you ends up dating someone like Dylan. I blinked. Someone like me. She smiled cruel and cold. You don't really fit his type. I forced a breath, my voice steady. You're right. I don't. She laughed softly, a little victorious sound, and walked away. That was when I decided not to give either of them another piece of my peace. I finished cooking, ate alone, and went upstairs to my room. But as I climbed the stairs, I froze halfway. Their voices, muffled laughter, curiosity, or maybe self-torture made me stop and listen. Bella. So this is the girl who paid your bills all those years? Dylan laughing. Yeah. She thought we were some kind of power couple. Really, she just made my life easier. Bella. She doesn't even dress well. How did you stand it, Dylan? I didn't mind at first. She was useful. Bought my lunches, covered rent, even paid for our dates sometimes. My heart pounded. Every word dug deeper. Bella giggled again. Wow, you really leveled up, didn't you, Dylan? Yeah. Guess you could say I upgraded. Something inside me went completely still. I turned away from the stairwell, walked silently back to my room, and shut the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing. My reflection in the mirror looked foreign, someone stripped of illusion, someone finally awake. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat there, the weight of years pressing down on me, until the muffled laughter downstairs faded into silence. The next morning, the apartment was quiet. His things were gone. The closet half empty, the nightstand bare. Only a few forgotten items remained: a comb, a broken charger, a half-empty bottle of cologne. I stood in the center of the room, breathing in the emptiness. And then I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I was free. That day, I cleaned every inch of the apartment. I scrubbed the floors, opened the windows wide, and let the wind carry away whatever pieces of him still lingered. When the sun set, I sat on the couch, my couch now with a glass of wine and silence that finally felt peaceful. Weeks passed. I started sleeping better, eating better. Work was thriving. Life was returning to color. Until one evening, as I came home, I noticed a thick envelope in the mailbox, my name written in his unmistakable handwriting. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a gold-trimmed wedding invitation. Dylan and Bella. I let out a soft laugh, part disbelief, part amusement, until I saw the small handwritten note at the bottom corner. I want you to attend my wedding, Donna, so you can see the life I'll have with Bella, the life you'll never afford. The laughter died on my lips. For a long time, I just stood there, the card trembling in my hand. Then slowly a different kind of smile crept across my face, quiet, sharp, dangerous. All right, Dylan, I whispered to the empty room. If you want me there, I'll be there. But he had no idea the kind of guest I planned to be. I placed the wedding invitation on my kitchen table and stared at it for hours. Every line of gold lettering shimmered under the light, mocking me. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore cordially invite you to the union of their daughter, Bella and Dylan Ward. I could almost hear Dylan's voice echoing in my head. So you can see the life I'll have with Bella, the life you'll never afford. It wasn't heartbreak I felt, not even jealousy. It was something colder, humiliation sharpened into resolve. He wanted to show off his success. Fine, I'd let him think he'd won, until the curtain fell. That night, as rain tapped gently on my windows, I opened my laptop and typed Bella's name into the search bar. Her social media appeared instantly a glossy, filtered world of designer bags, beach vacations, and champagne selfies. And then I saw it a post from a year ago. Bella and a tall, dark-haired man smiling on a pier arms wrapped around each other. The caption read, "High school sweethearts to forever." The comment stopped abruptly about 6 months ago. The same month she started posting pictures with Dylan. A pit formed in my stomach. I clicked deeper, scrolling through old tags until I found him. Jake Donovan. There he was. Handsome, confident, but in the last photo his smile didn't reach his eyes. A thought took shape, dangerous and deliberate. What if I brought him with me? The next day I found Jake's profile and hesitated before sending a friend request. My finger hovered over the button for a long moment before I clicked add. I didn't expect him to accept, but within an hour, a notification popped up. Jake Donovan accepted your request. Heart racing, I sent him a short message. Hi Jake, I know this might be random, but I think we've both been wronged by the same people. 10 minutes later, a reply. You mean Dylan and Bella? I exhaled, half smiling, so he already knew. I typed carefully. Yes, I'm his ex. He invited me to their wedding to show off. I thought you should know. There was a pause. Then, that sounds exactly like something they'd do. She cheated on me with him. We started talking. Slowly at first, small, awkward messages. But over the next few days, the tone shifted. We shared stories, connecting over the ugly similarities and how we'd both been used. I told him how Dylan treated me like a housemaid, how he laughed at me behind my back. Jake told me how Bella used to flirt with older men and manipulate anyone who adored her. She once told me rich people don't need love. They just need leverage, he wrote. And I was stupid enough to love her anyway. When I read that, I typed without thinking. We were both too kind for people who only valued convenience. He replied, maybe it's time they learned what real consequences feel like. 2 nights later, we spoke on the phone for the first time. His voice was warm, but edged with hurt. You really plan on going to their wedding? He asked. Oh, I plan on attending, I said, leaning back on my couch. But I'm not going to sit quietly and clap for their little performance. He chuckled low and bitter. You sound like you've thought this through. I have, I said softly. Dylan invited me to be his audience. I'll give him a show he'll never forget. There was a pause. Then, almost playfully, Jake said, So what's your plan exactly? I need a +1, I replied. He laughed a real laugh, this time tired but amused. You want me to go with you? Why not, I said. You're her past, I'm his. We'd make a perfect pair. He hesitated, then said quietly, You really think you're ready to face them? I've been ready since the day he left, I said. The following weeks were a blur of messages, late-night calls, and shared anger that slowly melted into something else, familiarity. Jake sent me screenshots of Bella's wedding post, pointing out the smallest details. She's overcompensating, he said once. Whenever she feels guilty, she flaunts. We both knew this wedding wasn't about love. It was about image, a mirror. Dylan needed to admire himself in. One night, Jake texted, If we do this, it's not just revenge, it's closure. I replied, Closure can look a lot like revenge if you do it right. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror, trying on dresses. None felt right until I found one I hadn't worn in years, a simple black gown with an open back. Elegant, confident, untouchable. As I zipped it up, I caught my reflection, and for the first time in a long time, I saw strength where there used to be doubt. I wasn't the girl who paid his bills or begged for appreciation. I was the woman he underestimated. When Jake arrived at my door the next morning, he looked sharp in a navy suit. For a brief second, the sight of him took my breath away. "You looked incredible," he said, his tone half playful, half sincere. "So do you," I replied, grabbing my clutch, ready to ruin a perfectly staged fairy tale. He smiled. "Lead the way." The drive to the venue was quiet but charged. I could feel Jake watching me occasionally, as if trying to read my thoughts. "You nervous?" he asked finally. I shook my head, not nervous, just curious to see how far they'll go pretending. As the Grand Hotel came into view, white marble flower arches and gold-draped curtains, I exhaled slowly. "Let's give them a memory they'll never erase," I said. Jake chuckled softly. "You know, Donna, you might be more dangerous than Bella ever was." Maybe I said, smiling faintly as I stepped out of the car, but at least I'm honest about it. I took his arm, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the doors where laughter spilled out from the grand hall. Inside, chandeliers glimmered, champagne glasses sparkled, and Dylan's face went pale the moment he saw me. He had wanted me there. He just never imagined I'd bring her ghost with me. The moment Jake and I stepped into the ballroom, the hum of conversation shifted. Heads turned. A few people whispered. The orchestra's soft melody suddenly felt like background noise to the weight of 100 curious eyes. Dylan was standing near the front greeting guests, with a practiced grin that vanished the instant he saw me. His jaw tightened. His champagne flute trembled slightly. Then his gaze slid to Jake beside me, and his entire expression collapsed into panic. I smiled, a calm, controlled smile that told him exactly what he needed to know. I'm not here by accident. Jake leaned close and murmured, "You weren't kidding. He looks like he's seen a ghost." "He has," I whispered back. The wedding was as extravagant as Dylan had promised. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen rain. Every table glowed with soft candlelight and white roses. A string quartet played a delicate waltz, while waiters glided between guests carrying champagne. Everything was perfect, sterile, rehearsed perfection. I could almost hear Dylan bragging, "Bella's family knows how to do things right." We took our seats in the fifth row, perfectly positioned, where Dylan could see me but not ignore me. He kept glancing over every few seconds, pretending to laugh with his groomsmen while his eyes flickered nervously toward us. Jake, calm as ever, sipped his champagne and whispered, "You know she always wanted a wedding like this. Said she'd make it royal someday." "Fitting," I replied. "Every queen needs her fool." When the music shifted, everyone stood. Bella entered on her father's arm, radiant in white satin. For a second, even I couldn't deny how stunning she looked. But beneath the veil, her eyes were wild, darting around unfocused, almost fearful. Then she saw Jake. Her smile faltered mid-step. She froze for the briefest moment before forcing herself to keep walking. Jake exhaled slowly beside me. "She wasn't expecting this," he murmured. "No," I said, "she wasn't." From where I sat, I could see the color drain from Dylan's face. He kept glancing at Bella, then at me, as though trying to calculate the level of disaster about to unfold. The ceremony continued, stiff and mechanical. The priest's words blurred into background noise as I watched the tension coil tighter with every exchanged glance. When Dylan took Bella's hand, she flinched. When he said "I do," she barely whispered hers back. But they finished it somehow. Rings were exchanged, vows were sealed, applause erupted. On the surface, it was flawless. But I could feel the crack forming, invisible but inevitable. At the reception, things began to unravel. Bella had changed into a silver gown, her smile thinner now, her eyes darting toward Jake again and again. Every time they met eyes, she'd look away too fast, her hands trembling as she held her champagne. Dylan tried to keep up appearances, laughing too loudly, touching her shoulder possessively. But anyone watching closely could sense the unease. When he finally approached our table, the mask almost slipped. "Donna," he greeted, his tone tight and falsely polite. "Didn't think you'd actually come." I met his gaze evenly. "You invited me. I'm not rude enough to decline." His eyes narrowed. "And you brought company." Jake stood, extending a hand with a faint smirk. "Nice to see you again, Dylan. Beautiful ceremony, by the way." Dylan's face blanched. His voice dropped. "What are you doing here?" Jake leaned closer, his smile never faltering. "I'm her +1. You remember her, right? The woman you used to live off." The color drained completely from Dylan's face. "You have some nerve." I placed my hand on Jake's arm, interrupting smoothly. "Relax, Dylan. We're just here to celebrate your big day." He forced a bitter laugh, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "You think this is funny?" "Not funny," I said softly, leaning forward. "Fitting." He glared jaw-clenched, then turned sharply and walked away. Jake exhaled. "You handled that beautifully." "I wasn't talking to him," I murmured, eyes following Bella. "This part wasn't for Dylan, it's for her." An hour later, Bella finally approached us. The crowd was thinner now, people dancing and chatting, unaware of the quiet storm forming in the corner of the room. Her voice was brittle when she spoke. "Jake, Donna, what is this?" Jake looked up slowly. "A wedding reception, apparently." Her lip trembled. "Why are you here?" "Because I said gently, your fiancé invited me. And I brought someone who used to believe in you." Her face turned crimson. "You had no right." Jake interrupted quietly. "You cheated on me with him, Bella. The least you can do is look me in the eye when you say that." She faltered, then looked down. "I don't owe you anything." Jake nodded. "You're right. You don't." He set his glass down, his voice lowering. "But you should know something. The man you married. He told Donna she was never enough, that she was just a wallet to him, the same way you were a trophy to him." Bella froze. For a moment I thought she might slap him, but instead she whispered, "That's not true." Jake met her gaze steadily, then asked him. The silence between them was deafening. Bella turned away, blinking fast, then walked off her hands, trembling. An hour passed. Dylan tried to keep the party alive, but whispers began spreading. The bride had vanished. I saw her father pacing near the entrance, the wedding planner whispering frantically to the bridesmaids. The music faded out, replaced by murmurs. Finally, one of the bridesmaids appeared, holding a folded note. "She's gone," she announced, voice trembling. "Bella left this." The entire room stilled. She unfolded the note and read aloud, her voice cracking. "I can't do this. Seeing Jake reminded me of what love used to feel like. I made a mistake marrying Dylan. Please forgive me. Bella." Gasps rippled through the guests. Someone dropped a glass. Dylan stood frozen at the center of the hall, his mouth opening, but no sound coming out. He looked at me. For a moment, time stopped. His face twisted between fury and disbelief, the proud man now humiliated in front of everyone he'd tried to impress. I didn't move. I just watched him calm and silent as his perfect world collapsed. Jake whispered beside me, "You didn't expect this, did you?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I only wanted him to feel small for one night, not destroyed." But maybe that's the thing about revenge. Once it begins, it doesn't stop where you plan. As the guests began leaving, awkwardly, Dylan stood alone at the altar, staring at the empty doorway where Bella had fled. For a long, strange moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then I remembered his voice mocking me, calling me weak. And I realized this was never just karma. It was the consequence of every cruel choice he ever made. 3 days passed after the wedding. My phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, messages from old acquaintances. Everyone wanted the same thing, to know what really happened. I ignored them all. But when I saw his name flash on the screen, my stomach twisted. Dylan. I didn't answer. At first it was just texts. "You think you're clever. You ruined everything. Pick up the damn phone." Then came the voicemails, angry, desperate, incoherent. Each one more unhinged than the last. By the 5th day, he stopped calling. I thought maybe he'd finally given up. But that Saturday morning, as I was folding laundry, a heavy knock echoed through my apartment. I froze. Another knock, louder, impatient. I walked slowly to the door, peering through the peephole. Dylan. He looked terrible. His suit jacket was wrinkled eyes, bloodshot hair disheveled. "Open the door, Donna," he shouted. "We need to talk." My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the top latch, but kept the chain on. I opened the door, just a crack. "You shouldn't be here," I said, voice calm but sharp. He leaned closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You destroyed my life." I almost laughed. "Your life, Dylan. You invited me to your wedding to humiliate me. You got exactly what you deserved." His eyes darkened. "You think this is funny? Bella's gone. She ran off with that idiot. You..." He jabbed a finger toward me. "You did this." I met his stare evenly. "No, Dylan. Bella made her own choices. You just underestimated the cost of lying to everyone, including yourself." He slammed his hand against the doorframe, making me flinch. "You wanted to ruin me." "You ruined yourself," I said quietly. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Do you even know what you've done? I quit my job, Donna. I thought I'd be set for life. Her family was rich, and she promised I'd never have to worry again. And now," he gestured wildly, eyes glassy, "I've got nothing. No house, no savings, no fiancé." Something cold inside me snapped. "You had a life once, Dylan. You just didn't value it. You used me, remember? He froze, blinking. What? I heard you. I said, voice low but steady. That night before you moved out. I heard everything you said to Bella, how you used me for rent money, how you laughed at me for being gullible. His expression faltered. You were listening. Yes, I whispered, every word. For a second, guilt flickered in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He scoffed. You shouldn't punish me for being honest. You were naive, Donna. That's not my fault. I stared at him in disbelief. You really think that makes you innocent? He leaned closer, bitterness twisting his face. You were convenient. I needed help, and you offered it. Don't pretend you didn't like feeling superior playing the savior. You loved fixing me. I stepped back, my pulse pounding. I loved you, but I never signed up to raise you. He sneered. And now look at you, a lone bitter hiding behind your fake confidence. That hit harder than I wanted to admit, but I didn't let it show. At least I'm not still blaming everyone else for my failures. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two ghosts clinging to a house that no longer belonged to either of us. Finally, I said, you need to leave, now. He laughed, but it cracked halfway through. Or what you'll call the cops. Yes, I said, simply pulling my phone from my pocket. Something in my tone made him hesitate. He stepped back, eyes flicking from the phone to my face. You wouldn't, he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Try me, I replied, thumb hovering over the screen. We stood there for 10 tense seconds before he finally exhaled and turned away. You're going to regret this, Donna, he muttered, stumbling down the hall. Yeah. I already did, I whispered after him, closing the door. When the lock clicked, the silence felt heavier than ever. I pressed my back to the door, my whole body trembling. For the first time since the wedding, I realized how fragile my peace really was. I replaced the locks the next morning and ordered a security camera for my door. I didn't trust him not to come back. My coworkers noticed something had changed in me. I smiled less. I stayed late at work, not because I had to, but because it was easier than coming home to memories that still smelled faintly of him. But one night, as I walked home from the train station, the air felt lighter. The moon hung low, soft, forgiving. I realized Dylan's shadow wasn't following me anymore. He'd taken enough of my time, my peace, my years. He wasn't going to take my safety, too. I was done with ghosts. 2 weeks later, a message popped up on my phone. Jake. Hey, are you free this weekend? There's something you should know. I hesitated before typing back. Me, about Dylan or Bella. Jake both, but it's not bad. Trust me. I stared at the screen, heart uneasy. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the whole saga buried. But curiosity, that old stubborn thing, refused to die. All right, I whispered to myself. One last conversation, then I'm done. I typed back. Okay, Sunday afternoon, my usual cafe. As I hit send, I didn't realize that this meeting wouldn't just close a chapter. It would rewrite everything I thought I knew about how the story ended. Sunday came quietly, gray clouds smudging the skyline. I chose a corner table at our usual cafe, the one with cracked marble floors, and the smell of burnt caramel that somehow made the air feel human. I ordered an espresso and waited, half hoping Jake would cancel, half curious what not bad news meant after everything that had happened. When the doorbell jingled, I looked up. Jake walked in first, wearing that same navy jacket he'd worn to the wedding, but his expression was softer now, lighter somehow. Behind him trailed someone I didn't expect to see again. Bella. For a moment, my chest tightened. The last time I saw her, she was a runaway bride. Now she stood before me in a simple cream sweater and jeans, no makeup, no diamond glare. Just a woman, human, nervous, humbled. Jake gave me a small nod. I hope it's okay that she came. She wanted to talk to you herself. I stared for a beat, then nodded slowly. Sure, sit. Bella took the seat opposite me, her hands trembling slightly around a paper cup. For a moment, none of us spoke. The sound of milk steamers and clinking cups filled the awkward silence until she finally whispered, I'm sorry, Donna. Her voice cracked halfway through my name. I blinked, stunned. Sorry. For what exactly? She swallowed hard. For everything. For the way I looked at you that night in your own home. For mocking you. For believing everything Dylan said about you. I said nothing, watching her eyes fill with regret. She continued, voice trembling. He told me you were controlling. That you made him miserable, that he was trapped. I thought he was just another man trying to escape a toxic girlfriend. I didn't realize he was using me the same way. I looked down at my coffee, my reflection rippling in it. You believed him because it made you feel better about taking him. She nodded, ashamed. I did. The honesty in her voice was disarming. Jake reached across the table, touching her hand gently. Tell her what you told me. Bella inhaled shakily. When Dylan and I started working together, he played the victim perfectly. He'd bring you up in every conversation how you nagged him, how you didn't appreciate him, how you kept him trapped. I pitied him. And when Jake and I were going through a rough patch, I let myself get pulled in. She paused, eyes glistening. I thought he loved me. But after the wedding, I realized I was just his next convenience. I stayed silent, letting her words hang there like fog. She continued, voice breaking. When I saw Jake at the ceremony, everything hit me at once. The guilt, the lies, the emptiness. I couldn't breathe. And then I realized I didn't want to spend my life pretending to be happy for someone who was only with me for money. Jake nodded softly, picking up where she left off. She found me in the parking lot. She was crying so hard she couldn't talk. We just drove. No plan, no destination, just away. Bella managed a small smile through tears. It wasn't romantic. It was messy, painful, confusing. But somewhere between all the apologies and long drives, I remembered who I was before Dylan. I looked at her closely, the way her shoulders had softened, how the sharp edges of arrogance had melted into something fragile. You seem different, I said quietly. I am, she whispered. I stopped chasing the idea of being chosen. I started choosing myself. Something in those words hit deeper than I expected. Maybe because it was the same lesson I'd been learning all along. We talked for hours. The anger I'd carried for so long began to loosen thread by thread as Bella spoke about the manipulation, the gaslighting, the loneliness that had mirrored my own. For the first time, I realized we were never enemies, just two women trapped in the same web, spun by the same man's need for control. When the sky outside began to turn the color of pewter, Bella stood. I don't expect forgiveness, she said softly, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not from anyone else. I looked at her, then slowly nodded. You don't owe me anything, Bella. I already forgave myself. That's enough. She gave a small, relieved smile. Thank you. Jake lingered as she stepped outside, then turned to me. You okay? I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like closing a book. Yeah. For the first time in years, I actually am. He smiled, eyes warm. Good. Because for what it's worth, you handled all this with more grace than anyone I've ever met. I laughed softly. Grace isn't the word I'd use. Maybe stubborn survival. He chuckled. That too. As we walked out together, the cool breeze met us halfway down the street. The city lights flickered on, painting the wet pavement gold. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met? I asked quietly. Jake thought for a moment. I think we'd both still be trying to understand what went wrong, instead of realizing it was never about us being broken. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's the real closure. He looked at me, half grinning. Maybe it's a beginning. Later that night, I sat by my window watching the rain trail down the glass. The city hummed softly below, alive and indifferent. My phone buzzed, once an unknown number. I didn't have to check to know who it was. I deleted it without reading. No anger, no shaking hands, just silence, peaceful and final. For the first time in years, I didn't need an apology. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need to be understood. I just needed to breathe in my own life again. Unshared, unburdened, entirely mine. I whispered to the quiet room. I wasn't the villain in his story. I just stopped being his victim. And with that, I turned off the light, letting the night hold me in its clean, new silence.